Bitcoin is literally up over $10,000 from the lows as it continues its bear hunt. In today's video, I'll be taking you through some of my trades, going over the most recent Bitcoin price action, and what you need to pay attention to in case we're about to roll over as we approach critical resistance. If you enjoy the content, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe. Without further ado, let's jump right into the video. Legends, the proof is in the pudding. My most recent Bitcoin long trade is one of my biggest trades that I've taken this year, and it is certainly my most profitable trade where I had the most conviction. You can see now that as we dumped to below $80,000 when everyone was freaking out, calling for 74K, calling for 60K, I went max long. Now, I don't want to contradict what I discussed in my last video, and that is in the bear market, I do believe that Bitcoin will be going much, much lower. But at this point in time, this was always a zone where we were going to get a significant bounce in the market. And you can see we are up over $10,000 from the lows. My most recent trade is currently sitting at $250,000, and I already secured around $100,000 in profit. Speaking of which, I discussed in yesterday's video how I would be looking for an Ethereum long, and I did go ahead and enter an Ethereum long in my free premium group. You can see that I'm currently up around $14,000, but to be honest, I'm not really liking what I'm seeing from Ethereum, and I'll talk about it in today's video as well. We entered right around $2,900, and right now Ethereum is just above 3K. By the way, if you want to know exactly how I'm trading this market, all of these trades were shared in my group. You have the first link in my description down below. You DM me the word premium on Telegram, and I'd be happy to onboard you into my free premium group. The only requirement is that you, of course, sign up with one of my affiliate exchange links and you start trading on one of these platforms. Also, please read the disclaimer in the description down below. I am not a financial advisor. Nothing that I discuss on the channel should be construed as financial advice. I'm just a guy on the internet sharing his analysis and sharing some of his trades in the crypto market. Let's get back into the video. So, you can see right here that I'm holding out on these trades. I will likely take a little bit more profit on my Bitcoin long given the fact that it's such a massive position. Bitcoin is approaching very, very critical resistance. And that resistance is indeed between $92,000 up to $94,000. We're getting close to the point now where we could be tagging that yearly open, which is right around $93,500. I am actually expecting Bitcoin to correct if it is to go ahead and continue a relief rally. I know that might sound counterintuitive, but right now, something that's very, very interesting to discuss is that there is tons of liquidity to the downside. Remember what we discussed. When everyone was freaking out because there was tons of selling for Bitcoin, I went long, and there was literally no more cumulative long liquidation leverage to the downside. It was an excellent risk to reward opportunity, and I discussed this in my group also on the channel. However, it was always within my expectation that we were going to build up a lot of long liquidity to the downside. This is a 3-day chart, and you can see that all the way down to around $85,000, there is hundreds of millions of dollars worth of liquidity, actually billions if we add all this up. So it's something to definitely consider. I don't think that we're just going to rip much, much higher from here. We are approaching a pretty important resistance zone. That is the yearly open. Now, if we start talking about what would happen if we can make it up to this yearly open, first and foremost, I would potentially be expecting a rejection. However, if we can reclaim it, then we start talking about targeting $98,000 and naturally above $100,000 for Bitcoin. But you need to be cautious with how you're playing this. This is not the time to pile into longs. As you can see, everyone seems to be piling into longs. People simply don't want a long when the price is going down, but if we approach critical support levels, which we've been discussing, it was one of the best opportunities in this market, and that's why I entered with this amount of capital, because I had a lot of conviction in this trade. Now, I also want to talk about the Bitcoin exchange liquidation map. You can see that on the 30-day time frame, it is relatively even now, meaning a lot more longs are starting to pile into the market. On the 2-week time frame, though, you can see that there's still a lot of liquidity to the upside. Most of the liquidity is right below $100,000, found right around that 98K region. And if you didn't know, 98K is absolutely pivotal in this market. If we zoom out here on the daily time frame, you can see exactly why. 98K is essentially where we had that big capitulation down that springboarded us all the way to new all-time highs for Bitcoin. It was essentially the start of the move. And so if Bitcoin is to make it back to this level, I would be anticipating a lot of resistance. However, we can't even talk about that until we can reclaim the yearly open. Right now, Bitcoin is sitting just below $91,000, and I don't like what I'm seeing with Ethereum simply because Bitcoin dominance is continuing to increase. Now, we discussed the fact that if Bitcoin is to bounce from the lows, we would likely see Bitcoin dominance decrease. And though in the short term, we did see a little bit of decreasing, in the more medium term here, you can see that Bitcoin dominance is continuing to crawl up, and I'm still holding on to my Bitcoin dominance trade, which I've been holding for months on Bluffin. By the way, if you want to trade Bluffin, you do have that second link in my description down below. And if you're a pretty big trader, I do have some VIP rewards for you. If you deposit 25K, you can get VIP 1, 50K, you can get VIP 2, and 100K, you can get VIP 3. The reason why these VIP tiers are so pivotal on Bluffin is because you can reduce your fees drastically. So if you're a big trader and this interests you, make sure to sign up with the second link in my description down below. But what I want to get at here is I'm not going to celebrate anything until Bitcoin can actually reclaim $98,000. On a relief rally, I've been pretty vocal about the fact that I do think we will see Bitcoin back above 100K. However, I still find it hard to believe that all we're going to get to the downside here is that capitulation wick and nothing more. Right now, we are approaching a pretty interesting resistance level. And if I'm going to be honest here, I'll obviously share this in my premium group, but the next trade setup will likely be a cheeky little short. I think that as more and more people start piling into longs, that's when you want to start looking for shorts. The reason I say this is simple. We are still very much in a downtrend. Don't forget how low we went from 126K. And I don't think that we're just going to see a V-shaped reversal to all-time highs. There will be resistance along the way. That being said, this is the beauty about taking some of those positions early on as everyone is freaking out, because now I can just sit on my hands, I'm comfortable, and I can manage this position accordingly. I can take some profits, I can move my stop loss at break even, which I've already done, and I'm not stressed in this market anymore. I just think that the next trade will likely be a short from my perspective, but I want to see signs of weakness. If we don't get signs of weakness, I'm simply just going to hold on to my long and see what the market gives us. Remember, no one can tell you with absolute certainty what is going to happen in the crypto market here. We have seen pretty crazy things before in the past where maybe we do go ahead and just V-shape. However, I am anticipating that the yearly open will pose some resistance, and if we can manage to hold that level as support, then we start talking about 98K, which would be a pivotal resistance zone in my opinion. Now, at this point in time, as Bitcoin just flirts around $91,000, you can see that yes, there is that upside liquidity, but on the shorter time frames, the 3-day, you can see tons of long liquidity, which we just discussed. Let's go on the 24-hour time frame to see if it paints a different picture. Not really. There is a little bit of liquidation leverage here to the upside above $92,000. Given the trend, this local trend, it is possible that we go ahead and grab this liquidity, and that's also why I haven't entered a short quite yet. I'm just telling you what I'm currently looking for in this market. The moment that everyone is convinced that the low is in and everyone continues to pile into longs, and we, for example, see that on this 30-day time frame, there is more cumulative long liquidation leverage in the market once more, that is likely when I will start to pivot my stance and go short, at least from a trading perspective. Now, from a spot positioning, as I've mentioned time and time again, I will be offloading some Bitcoin should we cross the $100,000 level once more. Now, I also wanted to talk about the ETFs because for 2 days in a row now, we have inflows. Although yesterday we only saw 20 million worth of inflows, but it is positive that BlackRock at this point in time are on our side and they continue to accumulate some Bitcoin. The thing to remember though, when they dump heavy. And we need to make sure that the S&P 500 also continues to increase, because this would likely signal that Bitcoin can go ahead and move higher from here if we are to get that continuation. Now, I also wanted to touch on Ethereum quickly. So right now you can see that we're actually below $3,000 for ETH despite this positive Bitcoin price action. When would ETH outperform? Because that was the nature of this trade. I took a long on ETH because I'm expecting it to outperform if and only if Bitcoin can hold these current levels. At the bare minimum, I don't want to see Bitcoin start losing $88,000. If we start to lose 88K with some heavy selling once more, then at that point in time, it will not be looking good. However, if Bitcoin does continue to consolidate right around here, and let's assume that the market just continues to try to chop people out. Let's say Bitcoin just chops around between $88,000 all the way up to $92,000. The longer that we stay in this region, the higher the likelihood that this Ethereum trade will start absolutely printing. However, lose a key level for Bitcoin, and naturally Ethereum will continue to suffer. That's why I entered that Ethereum long trade, because I am anticipating a little bit of consolidation. If we just start nuking, well, that's not going to be pretty, of course. Now, let's also talk about the total open interest. We know that it tanked on October 10th, and I just wanted to give an update on this from Credible. You can see that during that massive liquidation event, we absolutely nuked. Makes sense. However, the good thing for the market here is that we have absolutely continued to trend lower since that liquidation event. Now, the reason you like this is because it's a major deleveraging event. This began when Bitcoin was at $90,000 for the first time in December 2024 and ended last time around when Bitcoin was at $74,000 in April, 33% less open interest in the system. What followed from that previous dump was a deleveraging event that rallied all the way up to $112,000 for Bitcoin over the next 1.5 months, and then ultimately continuation to the all-time high of 126K. The current deleveraging event from 126K down to $80,000 has resulted in a 40 to 50% decrease in open interest thus far. This is ultimately positive. You want to see less leverage in the system because this can allow us to go ahead and move higher. We don't have to have those massive liquidation events to justify being able to move higher. That being said, on the shorter time frames, you can still see that there are some degens starting to pile into longs here. The time to pile into a long, in my opinion, is not at these levels. Can we move higher? Of course, there's a chance. But right now, we are approaching critical resistance. And the last thing I wanted to discuss today is just some news. You can see that the White House came out yesterday saying that the tax refunds in 2026 are projected to be the largest ever. We also have the fact that JP Morgan said that the S&P 500 could reach as high as $8,000 in 2026. And they came out supporting crypto, saying that it's emerging as a tradable macro asset. And what else do we have specifically in regards to rate cuts? Well, JP Morgan does expect that the Federal Reserve will cut interest rates in December. And as per the FedWatch tool, you can see that there's now an 85% chance that we get rate cuts in December. Last thing I wanted to talk about, which was pretty interesting, USDT issuer Tether becomes the largest independent holder of gold in the world. Why are these guys not accumulating more Bitcoin? These guys are preparing for what will likely be a bear market. So just to make it extremely clear, what are my views on the market? Right now, Bitcoin is approaching critical resistance. We cannot ignore that fact. That resistance is found between the yearly open and $98,000. Can we go ahead and target that level before reversing? Of course, there's a possibility. But what I'm looking for from a trading perspective is likely to be a short in this market as soon as we start to see that tons of people are piling into longs and everyone is convinced that that was the bottom. Remember, bottoms do take time to form. You can see this in the previous capitulation event when we had that whole tariff stuff. Now, we chopped around from this region and then we ended up moving higher out of here. I do firmly expect Bitcoin to go down in 2026 if history is to repeat and 2026 is indeed a bear market. Now, that doesn't mean that the market can't continue to soar maybe early 2026, but overall, I do think that the next bear market low should be found in 2026. And this should be seen as a major opportunity, in my opinion. Of course, I'm not a financial advisor. Nothing that I discuss on the channel should be construed as financial advice. But as per my last video, I am expecting Bitcoin to go below $70,000, likely below $60,000 in the next bear market. That is when I will be accumulating heavy. And remember, if you want to know exactly how I will be doing so, you do have the first link in my description down below, where I'll be talking about some of my spot positioning and, of course, my leverage trades. So, at this point in time, I think it still makes sense to sit out if you're not in an active trade. I am simply going to continue to manage these trades and I'll keep you updated if anything changes. However, in terms of the Coinbase Premium Index, which I just wanted to touch on before I wrap up this video, you can see that the trend is indeed positive. Now, if this can turn green, it would be positive for Bitcoin, signaling that we could see another bigger move to the upside. In other words, that relief rally that I've been discussing. And that sums up today's quick video. Bitcoin continues to grind higher. More people are starting to long this. However, we do have quite a lot of liquidity to the upside to be grabbed. Remember, the trend is still down and it was just an excellent risk to reward opportunity from those levels, which is why I entered that long. But my next trade is likely to be a short, simply with what I'm seeing on the charts here. As everyone gets extremely bullish, that's likely when I will position myself to enter a Bitcoin short. However, I have not done anything quite yet. If you enjoy the content, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you in tomorrow's video.